So if you have just joined us, we are now nearing the close of this conference with the keynote, closing keynote, which will be on the topic of drivers for growth in the satellite industry. If you missed the previous panels or sessions, don't worry about it because we are actually publishing these proceedings on video in both YouTube and in the Intersputnik NatSatTel website and the Satellite Markets and Research website. So that will be available in a couple of weeks. And again, just to remind you, this is now our final two more sessions, one short summary at the end, but there's a chat button there if you want to ask questions. So this is your last opportunity to ask those questions. So for our closing keynote, we have Jean-Baptiste Thepaut. He's the principal at Novaspace, which is a leading analytical firm, which is a merger of Euroconsult and SpaceTech's partners. So prior to joining Novaspace, Jean-Baptiste was a senior manager with Eutelsat, one of the major operators, Eutelsat's corporate strategy and mergers and acquisition team, where he contributed significantly to the merger with OneWeb and to the company's GEO and LEO business. So without further ado, Jean-Baptiste Thepaut on drivers for growth in the global satellite industry.
Thanks a lot, Virgil, and thank you to the conference organizers. I don't know if you can display my presentation or...
Please display first slide. Yeah.
Perfect, and we can go directly to the next slide then.
Next slide.
Yeah, thank you. So let's start with a few words on Novaspace. So as Virgil mentioned just before, the name is new, but you all probably know us under our previous branding, either Euroconsult or SpaceTech partners. So we are a privately owned and fully independent management consulting company with over 40 years of experience in the space sector and a global presence. So we provide support and expertise to our customers among four complementary services. Most of you know us for our market intelligence reports, and we release about 20 of those reports annually, so covering all key areas of the space sector. But we also manage about 150 management consulting mandates every year, including market assessments, due diligence, strategy and business planning, and policy development. We also have a technology consulting arm which supports the development of space projects through all their stages of their life cycle, so including technical due diligence, technology advisory services, program management, etc. And finally, we connect top industry leaders across the globe through our executive summits, including notably the World Satellite Business Week, which usually takes place in September in Paris. And next slide, please. So diving into satellites market now. I think it's fair to say, and we have heard that before today, that our sector has transformed quite radically over the past few years. And the winds of change started blowing around 2016, at a time where the broadcasting activities of legacy satellite operators started to show the first sign of decline after decades of continuous growth. At that time, the focus of these operators that were actively looking for growth relays therefore turned toward the connectivity markets, which led to the launch of many high-throughput systems, such as Intelsat Epic or Inmarsat's Global Express, for example. We then entered an area of turbulence, so which coincides roughly with the entry of service of the first LEO constellations. And again, I think it's fair to say that Starlink has quite massively disrupted our industry. So starting first with the consumer broadband market and progressively expanding to most of the connectivity verticals. Satellite customer expectations have been completely remodeled by Starlink, so customers have progressively abandoned historical satellite requirements, such as a committed information rate, and massively adopted new standards, including notably flat panel antennas. Competition intensifies drastically, and the entire value chain adapted to this new state of the market by either becoming Starlink distributors or actively organizing the resistance and making plans for competing NGSO constellations. We are now in 2025, so on the verge of a new area. Now that the dust starts to settle a bit, I think it's time to reimagine satellite connectivity. So we have 2 active satellite LEO constellations and at least 3 to 4 others with a decent chance of materialization in the near future. So competition will continue to intensify. However, so satellite services will change considerably. We will see more and more hybrid networks combining GEO with MEO and LEO capabilities. We will see a gradual transformation of traditional satellite services with the objective of ensuring a seamless experience at home, at sea, or in the air. And we will see the emergence of new services such as direct-to-device and IoT, which will all contribute to a massive increase of the total satellite demand. This will be supported by software-defined payloads in space, ground segment digitization, and a growing integration of satellites with cloud services. If we go to the next slide, please. So this growing demand will be enabled by two factors. The first one is the supply. So as you can see here, supply has already been multiplied by 10 between 2017 and 2023, and it will again grow tenfold within the next 10 years, largely due to the massive influx of capacities that will be brought by constellations. And as a result, prices will continue to decline considerably, coming closer and closer to terrestrial price points and creating market elasticity, thus ultimately boosting satellite demand. So this massive demand growth will also rely on four structural drivers for which there is still a certain level of uncertainty remaining. The first one is user terminals. We've seen considerable progress on user terminals over the past few years, notably from Starlink, and we've seen impressive mock-ups of future Amazon Kuiper terminals as well. But will non-vertically integrated NGSO operators such as OneWeb, Telesat, and SES be able to compete on this front and develop terminals that are compatible with the market expectations? That is still a question. The second one is transparent multi-orbit services. So again here, this trend has already started a few years ago, so notably pushed by satellite service providers, which are aggregating multiple solutions in LEO, MEO, and GEO to provide sufficient throughput to high-demand verticals or to ensure redundancy of critical traffic. The next few years should see the development of smart traffic orchestration and of hybrid products provided directly by satellite operators. But will that be met with commercial success in a market with terabits of capacity available in LEO? I also heard during a previous panel today that the cost of user terminals was a critical driver for multi-orbit connectivity, and I fully agree with this. But this is going to be an additional challenge for our industry. Then we have 5G integration, which is expected to be a key driver of future growth, with satellite expanding 5G access to remote regions, offering connectivity in mobile scenarios, and creating a seamless transition between fixed and mobile network for users. And finally, we have service integration. We've seen satellite operators and service providers bundling capacity with more and more services over the past few years, and we expect this trend to strengthen in the future, notably with the offering of more and more cloud services, which will notably be enabled by ground network virtualization. If we go to the next slide, please. So as we've just seen, capacity prices are expected to drop considerably over the next decade. However, the growth in demand is such that despite this massive capacity price decrease, service revenues are expected to grow. So from 103 billion in 2023 to 117 billion in 2033. The takeoff of data segment revenues, which will be multiplied by 3, will be partly counterbalanced by the continued decrease in video revenues due to the decrease in pay TV DTH subscribers and the continued prevalence of OTT solutions. So GEO, which accounted for 96% of service revenues in 2023, we'll see its share of revenue naturally decrease in the coming years as NGSO continues to gain ground in data segments. By 2033, NGSO should account for about 1/3 of service revenues and be the leading revenue generator in all data segments, while video revenues will remain quasi-exclusively on GEO. Multi-orbit service revenues will grow from virtually 0 in 2023 to roughly 4 billion in 2033. And next slide, please. If we take a look now at market demand forecast for legacy connectivity applications. So Novaspace expects the number of SATCOM users to be multiplied by around 2.5 over the next decade. This will largely be driven by consumer broadband, where the continuous progress of Starlink and the market entry of Amazon Kuiper are expected to foster the development of the market. Another key area of growth will be mobility. So most of the user terminal growth here will not be driven by aircraft and maritime vessels, which are already well connected, but by the rise of the land mobility segments. So we notably expect a considerable development of the agriculture market. And again, Starlink is already a bit ahead here, having signed a strategic partnership with John Deere in 2024 in the US and in Brazil. And we expect as well a sustained growth on the recreational vehicle segments. So the number of terminals is growing, but the biggest contributor to the demand growth is not the number of terminals, but actually the massive increase that is expected in the provisioning rate per terminal, so the throughput per terminal. which is expected to be multiplied by 5 across the board over the next 10 years. NG and SO constellation have set a high bar here, so forcing the entire market to adapt and offer much higher provisioning rates than before. And this is particularly true on the fixed enterprise and government market segments, where provisioning rates is still a major pain point of satellite users, and where the expected decrease in capacity pricing will allow to multiply the provisioning per site by a staggering 800% within the next 10 years. All in all, this would lead to a multiplication by 12 of the total market demand, which is actually growing slightly faster than the expected supply growth, and which would tend to validate the old telecom axiom that there is never too much capacity available on the market. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So we have discussed legacy satellite applications, but the next few years should also see the emergence of new connectivity services, and specifically D2D and IoT services. The adoption of these two new services will be driven by the same need for ubiquitous and reliable coverage, and part of a similar dynamic of hybrid networks combining satellite with terrestrial systems. I'll start with IoT, so which is not a new system per se, as Iridium, Globalstar, Opcom, Inmarsat, and others have been providing IoT services for decades now using MSS spectrum. However, the next few years will see the entry in service of multiple constellations specifically dedicated to IoT. We have Kineis, which has just finalized its deployment a few days ago, Sateliot, Myriota, Fossa, and Fleet notably. So this sector is propelled by low-power, low-cost innovation tailored for IoT-specific use cases, emphasizing efficiency over bandwidth-heavy applications. Satellite IoT technologies have become more and more cost-effective, which will boost their expansion in the coming years. However, the satellite IoT sector will face several challenges that need to be addressed to support adoption and continued growth. High cost and constraint interoperability continue to be a major barrier to adoption, as are the performance management and networks congestion issues, or the spectrum coordination across multiple countries, and the security of the transmissions. Overall, we expect the number of connected devices to be multiplied by around 3 within the next decade, reaching 16 million in 2032, while revenues will only increase by 50% due to decreasing capacity prices. On D2D, we have seen a wide range of market forecasts over the past few years, so basically ranging from D2D will not really work at all to D2D will fully replace terrestrial operators. And to be completely honest, it's not an easy market to forecast, so due to the massive uncertainties on actual service performance, on service pricing, and on the willingness of potential subscribers to pay for the service. So one thing is certain, there is a lot of enthusiasm for D2D services. T-Mobile launched the Starlink D2D beta in the US a few weeks ago with an ad during the Super Bowl. And Vodafone and AST announced during the Mobile World Congress last month that they would launch a jointly owned company to commercialize wholesale D2D services to European mobile operators. So we expect this market to increase much faster than the pure IoT market, with a total number of connected devices reaching 130 million in 2032 versus 12 million today, and revenues in the range of 7 billion from nearly zero as of today. If we can go to the next slide. So yeah, so the road to commercial success for D2D players will not always be smooth. So there are many players intending to get their share of the market, and already we have 2 different strategies here. So we have historical players such as Iridium, Inmarsat, and Globalstar, which will rely on their existing spectrum rights, which simplifies a lot the coordination with terrestrial MNOs and allow them to operate autonomously, but at the cost of a lesser user terminal compatibility. So the main condition for success for these players will reside in their ability to convince OEM chipset and phone manufacturers to integrate their frequencies and ensure hardware compatibility with unmodified phones. And on the other side, we have new entrants. So we have Starlink, Link, AST SpaceMobile, which are relying on the spectrum of mobile network operators and can therefore only operate through partnership with these MNOs. For them, the main condition for success is their ability to sign deals with telcos before their competitors and expand their reach as quickly as possible. Time to market will be a key condition of success for all players on this market. So revenue generation will only start once the constellation are up and running. And we've seen with Starlink on the broadband side that the first mover advantage is really critical in connectivity, as it generally sets the standards against which the following competitors will be evaluated. Another critical success factor, and one which was mentioned by Armand earlier, is the end user willingness to pay for this service, and this is still very much in question. So T-Mobile and Starlink price their D2D service at around $15 per month, which might be acceptable in a country like the US, where there are still large unconnected areas and where the service ARPUs are orders of magnitude higher than in the rest of the world. But this kind of service pricing is probably not going to be possible in Europe, for example, where there are less unconnected areas and where the ARPUs are much lower. So finally, commercial success will rely on the technical ability of D2D providers to move from SOS emergency and tech services to voice and low data rate applications, and eventually to broadband connectivity. And as you can see here, most of them intend to start small and progressively expand to higher tier services. The only outlier here is AST SpaceMobile, so which intends to provide the D2D broadband directly from the start, which could be a major differentiator if they manage to deliver technically up to their commercial promises. And next slide, please. So yeah, in the interest of time, I won't go too much details here, but we have seen a massive increase in competition over the past few years, and this has led to both vertical and horizontal integration strategies. Looking forward, we can probably expect more M&A activity and partnership between satellite operators in the future. Looking at specifically at horizontal consolidation trends, so LEO infrastructure requires considerable capex investments, often far beyond the capabilities of regional and even global operators. So to remain relevant on the market, traditional GEO operators will be pushed to combine or to partner to neutralize their investment capabilities and secure their future. But this horizontal consolidation will not be enough to thrive on the connectivity markets, and operators will also have to consider vertical integration opportunities to remain relevant. We've seen that Starlink and tomorrow Amazon Kuiper have demonstrated the benefits of vertical integration at service level and partly contributed to remodeling the value chain. And traditional operators will have to flesh out the service offering in the future. And if we look at the last slide, so a bit of a conclusion here. So what can we expect from satellite networks for the next decade? So my crystal ball only goes so far, but I think that we can safely bet on hybrid networks becoming more and more widespread. We already talked previously about GEO, MEO, and LEO hybridization, but we can probably add high-altitude platforms to the mix, notably for temporary broadband connectivity solutions. All these assets will need to be interconnected, which will require inter-satellite links and data relay capabilities at each level of the hybrid solutions. We are going to see satellites becoming smarter and smarter as well, with an increasing usage of onboard processors and the development of cluster processing capabilities in LEO. And this transformation will be further enabled by a growing virtualization of ground segment capabilities, which would facilitate the transition towards a fully integrated end-to-end cloud-based service delivery and the integration with 5G networks. So to come back to my introductory slide, the winds of change will continue to blow hard on the SATCOM industry, and the changes of the recent years are only the first symptoms of a profound revolution where satellite becomes an integrated part of a much larger connectivity infrastructure. Whether or not the existing SATCOM value chain can come out of this transformation unscathed is a topic for another discussion. So thank you very much for your time and your interest today, and enjoy the rest of your day. Back to you, Virgil.
Thank you very much, Jean-Baptiste. That's a really comprehensive view. We really get an overall picture of where the industry is heading. And it's very heartening to note that you project, Novaspace projects, that the satellite industry will continue to grow. From my calculation from your slide, the fourth slide about the services, about at least 15%. Video will decline, but it will be made up by the others. But I think you have a unique perspective, Jean-Baptiste, since having worked with Eutelsat and OneWeb. I think we have to address the elephant in the room, Starlink, which was previous. In most conferences, they talk about it, but they only kind of complain about it, not really offering, perspectives. But as previously presented, Starlink has a very dominant position right now. And you mentioned time to market is very important. They have now 70% share. Do you see that share changing in the next few years?
Well, I do. I mean, obviously, Starlink has a major advantage, and I think the adoption of Starlink across the past few years has been much faster than anticipated by almost everyone. But still, I mean, we will see an increasing amount of supply. We have OneWeb today. We will have Amazon Kuiper in the future for sure. We will probably have Telesat Lightspeed, and we will have as well Chinese constellation at some point. I don't see Starlink keeping the same market share as they do today. That being said, this new constellation will need to find differentiators as compared to Starlink. And this is not something that is quite easy, as I know from past experience. If we look specifically at OneWeb, we've seen over the past few weeks that there was a renewed interest in this constellation from governments, notably in Europe. We see that not all governments in the world are satisfied with having a constellation operated by a private US entity. So that I think that creates a lot of opportunities for other constellation projects, and notably OneWeb in the future. Of course, on the government verticals, so first and foremost, but also potentially in the future on enterprise verticals. I think we have a lot of enterprise that are protective of their data, and that would welcome the rise of sovereign constellations.
Right. Actually, Thomas Reddy asked about IRIS-2. What role will it play?
Well, I think
that's a European service, right?
Exactly. So IRIS-2 is a constellation that is financed both by the European Commission and by the efforts of European satellite operators. So there is notably SES, Eutelsat, and Hispasat involved in the consortium. So it's a federation of needs. There will be MEO and LEO satellites launched to satisfy the needs of both government and commercial users. I think it arrives at a point where we have a high need for sovereign capacity. So in that, the launch of IRIS² will be welcome. It arrives probably a bit too late, and also too late when we compare it to the initial expectations of the European Commission. So it will probably not be there before 2030, so which is already significantly later than expected. But it will bring at least some sovereign capabilities, notably for military applications, which is currently lacking in Europe in LEO. And it will also support the efforts of commercial operators, and notably of OneWeb and SES, for their next generation constellation systems, because it will create some synergies between the purely commercial projects and the public-private partnerships done as part of IRIS².
Right. Well, thank you very much. Really, that's really very, very good. And then you mentioned this is a time of turbulence, but there's a lot of things to look forward to. And if all the indicators are really, coming to its fruition, like for instance, the Satellite Industry Association, based here in the United States, is an international organization. They do an annual state of the art of the industry, and every year, even during the downtimes, in 2001 during the internet bust and the financial crisis, the satellite industry has always been growing, and as you said, it will continue to grow in the next 10 years. So thank you very much, Jean-Baptiste.
Thank you.